You're listening to The Pivot Point, where we unpack the defining moments that shift careers and lives. I'm your host, Laura Dionisio, founder of Lead Intact, and my mission is to spotlight the raw, real stories behind career pivots, the fears, the hopes, the messy middles, and the bold decisions that follow. If you're feeling stuck or quietly wondering what's next, I hope these stories help you see yourself a little more clearly and inspire you to start moving toward your own dream life. Let's begin. New year, new me. Are you in the camp where you are pro New Year's resolution, or are you against it? Because like my boyfriend, you think it's a waste of time and you're like, well, you can do it any day of the year. Why does the first have to be special? Well, I am in the camp of the former. I have a specific ritual that I do every December 31st, which I'm going to share with you in this episode. I love it. It makes me really happy. And yes, while you can make changes whenever you want, really, I just feel that because it has become a ritual at this point for me for many years, it becomes something extra special. So hopefully, if you are in the same camp as my boyfriend and you're like anti-New Year's resolution, stay with me. So here's how I view New Year's resolution. I used to be the person that made it very goal-oriented. So think like, oh, this year I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or this year I'm going to get a new job, or this is the year I am going to start dating again, or I'm going to move to Paris and eat baguettes every day. That used to be how I viewed New Year's resolutions. I have since changed it to be more about who am I becoming this year? So at the time of this recording in 2026, who am I becoming? And so my ritual is all related to that. So 2 things that I do. 1, I choose a word of the year, like an intention, so to speak, of who I'm looking to become. It could be a phrase as well. A few times I have made it a phrase rather than a word if it's fitting. So for example, in 2025, my word of the year was fierce. And I don't just mean fierce like this red leather jacket that I'm wearing, although that could be it as well. But I mean fierce in terms of showing up unapologetically as myself, being really fierce about saying yes to my desires, about going after what I want, even resting, about taking care of my own needs, about self-love. And so I had that word of the year in 2025 as kind of like a guidance of specifically what aspects of me that I wanted to evolve. The other thing I do is write it in a Post-it and I put it on my mirror, because I know quite a few people who do the same thing, like they do a word of the year. But then by the time we get together and I ask, what's your word of the year? Typically they're like, oh, I can't remember. And so for me, it's very important to remember, because then it's kind of like, what is the point of having a word of the year if you're not keeping track of it and not celebrating at the end of the year? But then again, I am a metrics person. This is going to be metrics oriented if you didn't catch on to that. But what I then do is throughout the year, right? So I have a Post-it with my word of the year. So 2025, it was fierce. And what happens is anytime I do something that is aligned to the identity of the version of Laura who is fierce, I write it down on a small Post-it and I date it, and then I stick it to my mirror. And I'm talking about my mirror like my floor length mirror, so full length mirror. And what's cool about that is that it's very satisfying to look at my mirror as time goes by and see the number of Post-its that fill it. And I really started this practice, this Post-it practice, not because I'm obsessed with Post-its. I am now. But just because I am the kind of person, and if you are a high performer, high achiever, you are probably this way too, I have tended to take my achievements, my successes for granted. And I was the kind of person who kept moving the goalposts forward so that I never really felt like I was winning ever. Because once I accomplished something, like let's say even my move from California to New York, my move from upstate New York to New York City, like I would take maybe 5 seconds to celebrate it and then I'd move on in my life. And so a few years back, I realized I don't like this. about myself. I was finding that my sense of self-worth was suffering a bit because I never took a moment to be gratitude for myself or proud of the things that I had done or really acknowledged my growth other than like maybe an entry in my journal or something. So it started off as like me having a visual, tangible way to view all of my accomplishments. So it used to be an accomplishment based practice. It pertained mostly to my weightlifting numbers because that was where I could see that I was being so hard on myself. Just to give you an example, these are made up numbers. There's this lift called clean and jerk. Let's say my PR at the time was like 145 pounds. And I was able to do 125 pounds in training for 3 reps consistently. But let's say one week, 120 pounds felt really heavy. I would be so hard on myself for that 120. That's all my mind can focus on. And it didn't matter if like 2 days prior to that, I hit 135 pound for 2 instead of for 1. I was always focused on my failures and things I can do better. And for a long time, I thought that was the way to go. I'm like, oh, but that's what's driving me to be better is because I'm never satisfied, right? I guess, but it didn't feel good. And so a few years ago, I decided that because I'm a very visual person and because I also like to gamify things, I want to not only celebrate these little wins, but I also want it to be kind of like a game, like, ooh, how fun does it get to be? And so since then, I have morphed that to not just accomplishments, but specifically like aligned actions towards whatever your word or phrase of the year is, right? So for example, in 2025, let me see if I can remember some of the things. Oh, like fierce, right? Me leaving corporate, me putting my notice in, me being honest with myself. Like these are things that I would write. It doesn't have to be like anything big. That's not the point. The point is I heard this in an interview with, I believe it was James Clear. Is he the author of Atomic Habits? But he said something like, anytime you do an action that's aligned to who you want to be, it's like you're handing in votes to the person that you're becoming. And so I see it that way now, so that by the end of the year, it's almost like I see all these votes to me becoming more fierce, right? Or whatever the word or phrase of the year is. So that's step one. So it's not too late to start, right? Like if you're listening to this at the time that this is released, which is in January, it doesn't matter when you start. When I first started, it was probably like August, September. It doesn't matter when you start, but if this practice resonates with you, go ahead and reflect on what your word of the year is going to be, even if you only have 1 or 2 months left in 2026 or whatever year you're listening to. And really, what I found is that because I've been doing this practice for years now, my mind is now more attuned to the ways in which I am winning versus the times in which I am failing. So now, anytime I'm like, oh yeah, like say in 2025, that was like a fierce action. I'm like, oh, don't forget to write it on a Post-it. It's just really exciting to visually see. It's almost like you're seeing your growth because of the number of Post-its around your mirror, or maybe you have like a wall somewhere. The other thing I do now is every December 31st, I take all of those Post-its down and because I'm me, I put it in numerical order, meaning January is at the top and then December is at the bottom. And I go through each of them one by one. And I take a moment to let the memories come back to me, to let myself feel, to let myself remember. And it is such a beautiful experience because I don't know about you, but I tend to forget things that have happened. You know, it was really cool to watch my own growth and to remember all the things that have happened in the year, the good times, the bad, the hard, the things that felt easy, that kind of thing. And by the way, since this is a career-related podcast, this is super important to do as well from a work standpoint. So I'm going to take a pause with regards to like my New Year's ritual. This is what I started doing also a few years ago when I was still working in corporate. I had a standing meeting with myself every Friday for an hour, and I just called it career block. And part of the things that I did during my career block is that I would look at the week and I would write down the accomplishments and I would put detail. What was it? It's not just like, oh, I feel good because I finished this project. I wrote down the project, exactly what I did, who I talked to, etc. Why is this important? Because this is also the time of year where it's performance review. And it's really helpful because, again, I don't know about you, but before I started doing this in my performance review, I could only speak to like the past 2 months, maybe 3 months, like looking through my notes. Well, if you've been collecting data basically like every week on all the things that you've done and specifically highlighting things like, oh, include also like any awards you've gotten. If you have thank yous from other teammates, put it in a folder. That's something you can reference as well. That's good to reference if you're looking to have like a raise or promotion. But anyway, okay, so totally got sidetracked, but that's okay because I feel like it was pertinent. Okay, back to the ritual. All right, so I take a moment, several moments, and read through all the post-its. And then the other thing I do is every December 31st, I write a letter to the following year. So like in December 31st, 2024, I wrote a letter for December 31st, 2025 me. And then on December 31st of that year, I read that letter, maybe cry a little bit, and then I write a letter for the following year. And then I also put that on the mirror because otherwise I'd probably lose it. In the letter, I usually write like what my word of the year is for that year, what I've done. And then I write like my hope for you is, and then I write down the things that I wish for future me, right? For me, at least, like I tend to forget what I write almost immediately. So it is always a surprise to me what I've written from the year before, and hence the possible tears. Well, maybe that's just me. It was really cool because some of the things I wrote in there was something like, I hope at this point you are leaning fully into your business and that you've left corporate. And if you are in corporate, I hope you're doing something that you love. And you know what's crazy? And this is the thing, I guess I tend to be more honest when I'm writing these letters. My decision to leave corporate, like consciously when I was just like all in, I'm doing this, wasn't until like August of 2025. I met up with a friend in May and she had told me May of that year that I had said it, but I completely forgot about it. And now I have this letter telling me that December of 2024, I was thinking of leaving corporate. So it's just really cool. And that's where it brought literal tears to my eyes because I'm like, wow, 2024 Laura had such hopes and like love and faith in 2025 Laura. And it was cool that like a lot of the things that I said had actually happened. So that is my New Year's ritual. I guess it's technically end of the year ritual because it's in preparation of the new year. The other thing that I started to add starting this year, because a friend of mine had mentioned it, and again, it's all related to identity, is rather than having like a goal per se, because let's face it, even like the word or phrase of the year, it's still a goal, right? It's something that you're walking towards, which personally I think is really important. But my friend had suggested that what if it's like a question that you ask yourself? The example that they had given, because the other person said something like, well, what happens if you don't know the answer by the time it's the end of the year? And the person who suggested this practice said it's not so much about answering the question. So the question isn't something like, will I get a new job, or what is my calling? It's more about who you are as a person. So the example that was given is their question for that year is, how can I be more open? Right? So think about that. If your goal is a career that you feel that passion again, then maybe your word of the year is something like confidence, or maybe it is something like open, or it could be something like dream, right? Because that talks about the person you need to become in order to have the career that you want. And then maybe your question is something like, how can I be more curious? Or how can I see myself differently? How can I shift my perspective? So anyway, I just wanted to share that. I know this is a little bit different than my usual episodes, but I figured it'd be worthwhile to share what my practice is because it really, I mean, I call it end of the year practice or New Year's practice, but honestly, I do it throughout the year. Hope that helps. And remember, I have the mug this time. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember to proceed as if success is inevitable because that's how it becomes inevitable. All right, take care. All right, friend, that's it for today's drop. If this episode hits something deep, don't just sit with it, act on it. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it, and then head to www.leadintact.com to grab your free heart-aligned career transition starter or book a free 20-minute call with me. I'm here when you're ready to stop feeling stuck and start moving toward what you really want. Catch you next time.